Everyone tried to calm the Alpha King's fury, until the blind Omega kissed him. Now he can't let go. Its mountains clawed at the clouds, and the rivers ran thick with shadows, carrying whispers of old curses and broken promises. In the center of this kingdom, the great palace rose like a jagged crown of stone. Within its walls lived Kale, the Alpha King, feared by all, loved by none, and trusted by even fewer. His wrath had become a legend. When Kale's anger struck, the land itself seemed to shiver. The nobles tread carefully around him, their voices low and cautious. General after general had tried to soothe his temper after the betrayal that had nearly destroyed the kingdom, but none had succeeded. Kale's heart had grown colder than the winter winds that whipped through the castle towers, and those who dared approach often left with broken pride, or worse. On this day, the council gathered in the grand hall. Tapestries hung heavy on the stone walls, depicting battles from centuries past. Outside, thunder rolled, echoing the storm that seemed to rage within Kale's chest. The hall smelled of burning candles and polished wood, but even that familiar scent could not calm the tension. Kale stood at the head of the table, his broad shoulders tense beneath a cloak of deep crimson. His dark eyes, sharp as knives, swept over the gathered lords and ladies. "We cannot ignore the signs," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Our enemies grow bolder every day. The borderlands are in chaos, and yet you argue over coins and favors as if nothing threatens the throne." A murmur passed through the room. No one dared to speak too loudly. The Alpha King's gaze fell on each of them, and the weight of his fury pressed down like the storm clouds above. "Your Highness," Lord Vareth began, a man whose fear of Kale was thinly veiled, perhaps nothing. Kale's roar shattered the hall, rattling the chandeliers. "Every moment you waste in petty disputes, our enemies gain strength. Every moment you hesitate, our kingdom bleeds, and I will not." A sudden hush fell. The doors to the hall opened with a creak and a figure stepped in. Leora. She moved quietly, her bare feet silent against the polished stone. She was blind, though no one would have guessed at first glance. There was a serenity about her, a stillness that drew attention even as it repelled fear. She carried no weapon, bore no armor, yet there was a power about her that made the courtiers shift uneasily. Kale's eyes narrowed. He had heard whispers of her, an Omega who saw the world differently, whose senses beyond sight could reveal truths hidden from ordinary eyes. And now she stood before him, small but unafraid. "You summoned me, Your Highness," Leora said, her voice soft but steady. There was no fear in it, only calm. "I did," Kale replied, his tone clipped. "You are said to see what others cannot. I need someone who understands the shadows, who can find the truths hidden beneath them." Leora nodded once. "I will do what I can." Kale stepped closer, the storm of his anger still thrumming through him. He felt the pull toward her, though he could not explain why. There was something in her stillness, something in the quiet strength of her presence that unsettled him. "You have no idea what you face," he said, almost as if speaking to himself. "No one survives standing in the path of Thaloria's enemies unscathed." "I do not fear," Leora replied. Her words were simple, yet they carried weight. Kale's fury, sharp and unyielding, met a wall of calm he could not penetrate. The room seemed to hold its breath. The courtiers stared, uneasy. No one had dared speak to Kale like this. Not in centuries. Kale's jaw tightened. He did not know what to make of her. She was blind, yet she saw things he could not. She spoke without hesitation, yet her voice did not tremble. And then she did something entirely unexpected. She stepped closer. So close that Kale could feel the faint warmth of her presence. And then, gently, she pressed her lips to his. The hall gasped. Lord Vareth nearly fell from his seat. Kale froze, stunned. The kiss was light, fleeting, almost a whisper, but it carried something he had not felt in years, a softness that spoke to the hurt beneath his rage, a reminder that he was not just a king, but a man. For a moment, the storm within him faltered. Kale could not pull away. He had faced battles, betrayals, assassins, and curses, yet this simple, fearless act shook him to his core. The courtiers stared in silence, unsure whether to intervene or flee. Cale's mind whirled. Anger and confusion warred with something dangerous and unfamiliar. Desire. Respect, awe, he could not name it. When Leora pulled back, her eyes, blind yet seeing far more than most, met his. "You do not need to face the shadows alone," she said softly. "I will help you." Cale's voice was a growl, but there was no command in it. Why are you not afraid of me?" "I am not here to fear," Leora replied simply. "I am here to see what others cannot, to hear what others cannot, to be where others cannot." The Alpha King's hands clenched at his sides. For a long moment no one spoke. Then slowly Cale straightened, regaining some of his composure. Yet inside a storm lingered, wild and unpredictable. Leora had touched a part of him that had lain dormant, a part he had buried beneath anger and duty. "Very well," he said, voice low and measured. "We will see what you can do, but be warned, the shadows are not kind, they do not forgive weakness." "I am not weak," she said, and Cale, though he would never admit it aloud, believed her. The council resumed, though the tension had shifted. Now there was not only fear of Cale's fury, but also a cautious curiosity about the blind Omega who had dared to challenge it. As the day faded into evening, Cale found himself alone in his private chambers, staring at the window where lightning streaked across the sky. His thoughts returned to Leora. Her presence lingered like the scent of rain on stone. Her bravery, her calm, her fearless kiss, it all haunted him. He had been a king of iron and shadow for so long. He had wielded his power like a blade, cutting down those who betrayed him, crushing those who dared oppose him. And yet he could not stop thinking about her. A knock at the door broke his reverie. It was one of his guards, bowing low. "Your Highness, dinner is served." Cale waved him away, unseeing. His mind was elsewhere. He thought of the calm strength in Leora's voice, the softness in her touch, the way she had looked at him as if she could see every scar, every betrayal, every hidden ache he carried. The Alpha King had faced countless battles, but this quiet storm of emotion, was unlike anything he had ever known, and he would not ignore it. Outside, the wind howled through the towers and the storm raged on. The kingdom of Thaloria trembled, not from the fury of the king, but from the quiet, unstoppable force of a blind Omega who had dared to kiss him, and in doing so had awakened something he could no longer control. Cale clenched his fists. He did not know what the future held, nor did he know whether he could trust the pull he felt toward her. But one thing was certain, he could not let her go, and somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes watched, plotting, waiting. The kingdom's enemies would not hesitate, and Cale's new vulnerability, the blind Omega who had stolen a piece of his heart, might be the key to saving or destroying Thaloria. Cale turned away from the window, his resolve hardening. He would protect the kingdom, yes. But he would also understand the strange, unearthly force that Leora had awakened in him. Whether he could master it, or whether it would master him, remained to be seen. For the first time in years, Cale did not feel alone, and yet, for the first time in years, he felt fear. Not of enemies, not of war, not of betrayal, but of the truth that Leora had shown him, that even a king of shadow could be touched, changed, and undone by something as simple as a kiss. And so, the stage was set. The Alpha King's fury, once unchallengeable, now had a new force to contend with, a blind Omega who could see far deeper than anyone else, and a destiny that neither of them yet fully understood. The night stretched on. Storm clouds rolled across the sky, and lightning illuminated the jagged towers of the palace. Somewhere, deep in the kingdom, shadows stirred, sensing the shift. Cale's world was about to change forever. And he did not know if he was ready. The storm of the previous night had passed, leaving Thaloria cloaked in an uneasy calm. The clouds lingered like a gray veil, and the winds carried the scent of wet stone and distant thunder. In the palace, Kale moved through the grand halls with a quiet intensity, his mind occupied by thoughts of Leora. The blind Omega had not left his side since their first encounter, though she did not demand it. She simply followed, steady and patient, as if she belonged to a world beyond the sight of ordinary men. The nobles whispered behind closed doors. Many feared her, for a woman who could face the Alpha King without flinching was more dangerous than any blade. But the king himself was captivated in a way he could not explain. Her presence stirred a storm he had not known he carried within, one that did not seek to destroy, but to awaken. Kale stood at a window overlooking the northern cliffs. The sea beyond roared, waves slamming into jagged rocks, and the wind tugged at his cloak. He could feel the weight of his crown pressing down, heavier than ever, and yet he felt a strange lightness at Leora's near presence. "You think too much, Your Highness," Leora's voice called softly from behind. Kale turned. She stood there, calm and poised, as if the winds themselves had bowed in respect. "Do I?" he asked, a shadow of a smile on his lips. "You worry about enemies," she said, "about threats, about betrayals, and yet you do not see what stands before you." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Explain." She stepped closer, her hand hovering in the air, tracing the shapes of the room she could not see. "The danger you fear is real, yes, but the greatest threat is often what you do not understand. The sorcerer who betrayed you years ago, he moves again." Kale's chest tightened. That name, spoken so quietly, sent a shiver through him. The sorcerer, Malric, had once been his ally, a man whose ambition had led to bloodshed and betrayal. Kale had thought him dead, cast into the abyss of flames during the siege of Thaloria's eastern fort. Yet here was Leora, speaking as if she knew him, as if she could sense his approach. "How do you know this?" Kale demanded. "I feel it," Leora replied simply. "His shadow touches the land before his presence arrives. I have sensed it for weeks." "He is patient, waiting for the right moment to strike." Kale's hands curled into fists. "Then we prepare. We fortify the borders, call the armies, and strike him before he gains strength." "Not so fast," Leora said, her voice calm yet firm. "Patience can be a weapon. And sometimes the enemy comes for more than land or power. Sometimes he comes for what you love." Kale's dark eyes narrowed. She had not spoken carelessly. There was a warning in her words, one that cut deeper than any blade. The day passed in tense preparation. Kale summoned his generals, laying out strategies with precision and authority. But his mind kept wandering to Leora, to the strange pull he felt whenever she was near. He could not explain why her presence unsettled him and soothed him at the same time. She had touched a part of him he thought long dead, the part that remembered tenderness, trust, and hope. By evening, Kale found himself walking through the palace gardens. The roses, black and crimson, glowed faintly in the twilight. Leora walked beside him, moving gracefully despite the darkening sky. "You are quiet," she observed. "What do you think about?" Kale did not answer immediately. He looked out over the garden walls to the mountains that clawed at the clouds. "I think about the battles we have fought," he said slowly, "and the battles still to come. I think about what we have lost and what we may yet lose." Leora did not speak, but her hand brushed against his arm, a gesture so gentle that it barely disturbed the air. And yet it carried a comfort he had not known in years. "You carry too much," she said quietly. "Even kings need someone to stand beside them. You do not have to face everything alone." Kale looked down at her, the flickering torchlight reflecting in his dark eyes. "And you will stand beside me, even when the shadows grow long and the night is full of whispers." "I will stand," she replied, "not because I am fearless, but because I choose to." For a moment, the storm inside Kale stilled. It was a strange, fragile peace, yet it felt heavier and more important than any battle he had fought. The next day brought news from the northern borderlands. Scouts had seen strange figures moving through the forests, figures cloaked in shadow, carrying weapons that glimmered unnaturally. The threat was real, and Malric's presence could not be ignored. Kale convened an urgent council, this time with Leora at his side. "She senses more than you see," Kale told the gathered nobles, his voice carrying authority. "Do not dismiss her." The council murmured, some in fear, some in disbelief. Yet Kale's resolve left no room for argument. "Prepare the northern garrison," he commanded. "Send spies ahead, and do not underestimate the enemy. Patience may be a weapon, but we cannot be caught unaware." As the days passed, Kale and Leora spent long hours together, planning defenses, walking the gardens, and sharing moments of quiet understanding. The Alpha King's fury had softened slightly, tempered by Leora's calm presence. And yet, the pull between them grew stronger with each passing day, an unspoken tension that neither dared to name aloud. One evening, Kale found himself in the ancient library, a place filled with tomes of magic, history, and forgotten knowledge. Leora was there, tracing her fingers along the spines of the books, her steps soundless. "Do you think we can face him?" Kale asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "We must," Leora replied. "But we must also be ready to face ourselves. You fear what he might do, but I fear what you might become if you allow anger to rule you." Kale stared at her, the weight of her words pressing into him. "I am no stranger to anger," he said. "It has served me well. It has protected this kingdom even when others faltered." "And yet," she said softly, "anger can blind even the strongest king. You must see beyond it if you hope to survive, and if you hope to save those you love." Her words struck him deeper than any sword ever could. For the first time, Kale questioned not his enemies, but himself. The battles outside the palace walls were dangerous, yes, but the battle within, between fury and reason, pride and trust, fear and love, was far more perilous. As the night deepened, the library grew colder. Shadows stretched across the floor like living creatures, and the flickering candlelight cast strange shapes upon the walls. Leora turned toward Kale, her expression calm but resolute. "You must decide," she said. "Will you let the shadows control you, or will you use them to see clearly?" Kale did not answer immediately. He felt the weight of her gaze, the certainty in her voice, and the strange warmth that had begun to grow in his chest since the day she kissed him. He realized with a mixture of fear and wonder that he could not face Malric, or any enemy, without her. Days turned into nights, and the northern scouts returned with troubling news. Malric's forces had grown in number, moving with unnatural speed and precision. The sorcerer was clever, patient, and relentless. The threat was immediate, and Kale's mind raced with strategy and possibilities. Yet despite the looming danger, Kale could not ignore the growing bond between him and Leora. He saw how her presence steadied him, how her insight illuminated paths he could not see, and how her calm strength challenged his own fury. For the first time, he understood that power alone could not protect a kingdom, but trust, courage, and connection could. One night, as the moon rose high above the palace towers, Kale found Leora standing on the balcony, the wind tugging at her cloak. She did not see him approach, but he watched her for a long moment, studying the way her hair danced in the wind, the calm in her posture, and the quiet determination in her movements. "You wait long?" she asked without turning. "Not long enough," Kale replied, his voice soft. She looked at him then, her blind eyes lifting as if she could see more than anyone. "The night is full of dangers," she said, "but sometimes the greatest danger comes from within." Kale stepped closer, the wind tugging at his cloak. "And what of love?" he asked quietly. "Is it a danger too?" Leora's lips curved in a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Love is a fire," she said. "It can warm you, guide you, even protect you. But if you let it burn without control, it can destroy everything in its path." Kale did not answer. He only reached for her hand, feeling the soft strength in her grip. For the first time in years, he felt something he had long forgotten: hope. And yet the storm outside mirrored the storm within. Malric's shadow was approaching, and the kingdom's fate, and their own, was uncertain. The Alpha King and the blind Omega stood together on the balcony, the winds tugging at their cloaks, the night alive with whispers of danger. And though the world seemed poised on the edge of chaos, they were no longer alone. Together, they would face the shadows, and perhaps, just perhaps, the fire of their bond would be the light that guided them through the darkness. But deep in the northern forests, a dark figure moved silently, watching, waiting. Malric had returned, and the first move in a deadly game was about to begin. The northern forests of Thaloria were dense and silent, wrapped in mist that clung to the trees like a living thing. Even in daylight, shadows seemed to move with a mind of their own, twisting and stretching across the forest floor. Kale and Leora rode cautiously along the narrow paths, their horses' hooves muffled against the damp earth. The tension between them was thick, unspoken but undeniable. Kale's eyes scanned the tree line, sharp and alert, as his hand rested lightly on the hilt of his sword. "The sorcerer's forces grow stronger with each passing day," he said, voice low. "I cannot risk a direct confrontation yet. We must understand his plan first." Leora, riding beside him, did not respond immediately. She inhaled the forest scents, listened to its faintest sounds, and felt the vibrations of movement beneath the soil. "He is close," she said finally, "closer than even your scouts can see. His presence is like ice in the blood, cold and precise, and he is patient, waiting for the right moment to strike." Kale's chest tightened. The thought of Malric lurking in the shadows, unseen but watching, sent a familiar chill through him. Yet it was not fear that gnawed at him. It was frustration, frustration that he could not protect his kingdom fully, that his own instincts sometimes failed him, and that he was drawn to Leora in a way that made him feel exposed. Leora noticed his tension. "You cannot carry this alone, Kale," she said softly. "You have power, yes, but even kings need someone to see what they cannot. Let me help." He glanced at her, the wind tossing strands of her hair across her face. "You have no idea how dangerous this is," he said. "I have faced death more times than I can count. I will not let you risk yourself because of me." "And yet," she replied calmly, "I am already here, and I will stay. You cannot push me away." Her words stirred something inside him, a mix of admiration, longing, and fear. Kale realized that Leora's presence was not just a comfort, it was a challenge. She forced him to see himself clearly, to confront the parts of his heart he had long buried beneath fury and duty. As they rode deeper into the forest, a sudden movement caught Leora's attention. She guided Kale's horse to a halt. "We are not alone," she whispered. Kale's hand tightened on his sword. Shadows shifted among the trees, darker than the natural gloom, and figures emerged, Malric's scouts, cloaked and silent. The trap was set. Kale recognized it immediately. This was not an attack meant to kill. It was meant to test, to weaken, to confuse. "Prepare yourself," Kale murmured. "Stay close." The scouts attacked swiftly, striking from the shadows. Kale's sword moved with deadly precision, each strike calculated, each movement lethal. But there were too many, and the forest made it difficult to keep track. Leora moved with surprising agility, her senses guiding her to anticipate attacks. She touched the shadows, feeling their movement before they struck, and warned Kale just in time. Despite their skill, the scouts were relentless. Kale realized they could not hold the forest path indefinitely. "We must fall back," he said, leading Leora toward a narrower trail that twisted between ancient trees. As they ran, Kale noticed something strange. The shadows themselves seemed to react to Leora's presence, moving away from her touch as if she had some control over the darkness. He did not understand it yet, but he knew it was dangerous and powerful. They reached a secluded glade where the mist hung thick and the air felt heavy with ancient energy. Kale slowed his horse, breathing hard, and looked at Leora. "What is it about you?" he asked quietly. "You move through the shadows as if they obey you." "You are not like anyone I have ever known." Leora shook her head. "I do not control the shadows, I feel them. I sense their path, their shape, but it comes at a cost. Every time I use this gift, I feel a part of myself strain. I am vulnerable, Kale. Kale's gaze softened. For the first time, he saw her not just as an ally or a guide, but as someone who carried her own burdens, her own risks, silently and without complaint. I will not let you bear it alone, he said firmly. Their quiet moment was shattered by a sudden flash of light. Malric appeared, stepping out from the shadows, his robes flowing like smoke and his eyes glowing with cold fury. Kale's sword was ready in an instant, but even he could sense the immense power radiating from the sorcerer. Kale, Malric hissed, voice like ice against steel. You thought you could escape me. You thought the years had weakened me, but I have waited and now the time has come. Kale's eyes narrowed. We will stop you, he said, no matter what it takes. Malric laughed, a sound that carried through the trees like a warning. Stop me. You cannot even see the true power you face. Before Kale could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming shapes that lunged at them with unnatural speed. Kale fought with all his strength, but the shadows were relentless, each strike sapping his energy. Leora moved beside him, her senses guiding him through the chaos, warning him of attacks before they came. Yet even together they were overwhelmed. A massive shadow struck Kale, knocking him to the ground. Leora's hand shot out, touching his arm, and a surge of energy flowed through him, helping him regain his footing. He realized then that her power was linked to him, in ways he could not yet understand. Malric's voice echoed through the glade. You are mine now, he said, and the shadows surged around them, forcing Kale and Leora into a corner. Kale's mind raced. They were trapped, and he knew that brute force alone would not save them. He looked at Leora, her calm presence grounding him amid the chaos. We have to trust each other, he said. Leora nodded. Always. Together they moved as one, Kale's sword striking with precision, Leora guiding his movements with uncanny insight. For every shadow that attacked, they countered, their bond growing stronger with each moment. Yet Malric's power was overwhelming, and they could feel the ground itself shifting beneath them. Finally, Malric's laughter filled the air once more. You cannot win, he said. The darkness is mine. Kale's eyes burned with determination. No, he said, it is not yours, not while we stand together. Leora reached out, placing her hand on Kale's chest. He could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, and for the first time he understood the true depth of their connection. The shadows faltered slightly, as if sensing the strength of their bond. But before they could act, Malric unleashed a final attack, a surge of energy that knocked them both off their feet. They tumbled through the glade, landing hard against the mossy ground. Kale groaned, pain shooting through his side. Leora winced, clutching her arm, but she did not cry out. They lay there for a moment, catching their breath, hearts racing. Kale looked at Leora, seeing the determination in her eyes despite the pain. We cannot give up, he said, voice firm. We survive, we fight, and we will end this. She nodded, her expression resolute. Together. Kale reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. For a brief moment the chaos faded. The storm outside, the shadows, the sorcerer's power, all of it seemed distant. There was only the bond between them, fragile but unbreakable. But the danger was far from over. Malric's shadow lingered at the edges of the forest, watching, calculating, waiting for the next moment to strike. Kale and Leora had survived, yes, but they were not yet free. And the cost of their bond, the power they shared, the trust they placed in each other, was only beginning to reveal itself. As night fell over the northern forest, Kale and Leora made camp in a small clearing. The fire flickered, casting shadows across their faces. Kale watched Leora as she sat quietly, her senses alert even in rest. He could not name the feelings swirling within him, admiration, fear, longing, but he knew they were real and they were dangerous. You saved me today, he said softly. No, she replied, her voice calm. You saved yourself. I only helped you see what was already there. Kale shook his head. No, Without you, I would not have survived. I need you, Leora. I cannot face this without you." Her blind eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. "Then we will face it together," she said. And in that moment, amidst the shadows and the dangers that lurked unseen, a new bond was forged, not just of survival, but of trust, of understanding, and of a shared strength that neither had known before. But deep in the northern forests, Malric's laughter echoed once more. The sorcerer had seen their defiance, had felt their bond, and now he was more determined than ever. The next battle would test not just their skill, but the very hearts they had placed in each other's care. Cale and Leora had survived the first encounter, yes, but the chains of the heart, the weight of trust, fear, and desire, were only beginning to tighten. And as they settled for the night, they both knew that the trials ahead would demand more than strength and strategy. They would demand courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to face the darkest parts of themselves. And in the shadows, Malric waited, patient and cruel, ready to strike when they were weakest. The night was long and the fire burned low. But for the first time, Cale did not feel alone. He had Leora by his side. And that, he realized, might be the greatest weapon of all. The first light of dawn struggled to break through the dense clouds above Thaloria. The northern forest lay quiet, still tinged with mist and the echoes of the previous night's battle. Cale and Leora had survived, but exhaustion weighed heavily on them. Bruised, battered, and wary, they made their way back toward the kingdom, each step measured and deliberate. Cale walked with a new awareness of Leora's presence. She moved beside him, her calm guiding him in ways he had never experienced. The bond between them had deepened, through shared danger, whispered fears, and moments of quiet understanding in the forest's shadows. Cale realized that she was no longer merely an ally. She had become the anchor to his storm, the voice of reason in the tempest of his fury. Yet the weight of the coming confrontation with Malric loomed over them. The sorcerer's betrayal had left scars on Thaloria that ran deeper than the kingdom's walls. Cale knew that the final battle would demand everything: skill, courage, and the strength of their shared trust. "Cale," Leora said softly, breaking the silence as they approached the river that marked the edge of the forest, "we cannot fight him as we did before. He learns from every attempt. This time, we must be united not only in strategy but in spirit. He will test our hearts as much as our swords." Cale nodded, his eyes dark with thought. "I know, and yet I fear for what he might take from us if we fail. He will not stop until he breaks everything we hold dear." Leora reached for his hand. He glanced at her, startled by the simplicity of the gesture. "Then we will not fail," she said. "We fight together, not as king and advisor, but as two who trust each other completely. That is the only way to survive him, and perhaps the only way to save what remains of this kingdom." Cale's jaw tightened. She was right. Their bond, forged through fire and shadow, was more powerful than any army or weapon. And yet, the thought of facing Malric again, knowing the sorcerer's cunning, sent a chill through him. They arrived at the kingdom's border at nightfall, where the garrison waited. Cale addressed his generals, outlining strategies and contingencies. Yet his mind remained with Leora, with the unspoken connection that had grown between them. He could feel it in every glance, every touch, every moment of shared understanding. It was a fire that warmed him, guided him, and terrified him all at once. As they prepared for the final confrontation, scouts reported movement in the east. Malric's forces had arrived, shadow and flame moving with terrifying precision. The battle was imminent. Cale and Leora mounted their horses, their hearts synchronized, their resolve unshakable. The field before them was shrouded in mist, the air heavy with tension. The first clash of steel against steel rang out like a signal, and Cale led the charge, Leora guiding his movements with uncanny insight. Every strike, every maneuver was timed perfectly, their coordination seamless. It was as though they were two halves of a single entity, each completing what the other could not. Malric appeared at the center of the battlefield, his presence dark and overwhelming. Shadows swirled around him, twisting and reaching like living things. Kale's sword flashed, cutting through the first wave of darkness, but he knew brute force alone would not suffice. He needed Leora, her insight, her courage, her connection to him. Kale, Leora called, her voice clear and unwavering amid the chaos. Focus on me. Trust the bond we share. Kale's heart surged at her words. He did not hesitate. He allowed himself to move as she guided, following the rhythm of their shared strength. Every attack from Malric was countered, every trap evaded, and slowly the tide of battle began to shift. The sorcerer's eyes blazed with fury. "You think a bond can save you," he snarled. "You are fools to believe that love or trust can stand against me." Kale did not answer with words. He answered with action. With Leora at his side, he fought with precision and courage, their movements almost instinctual. Shadows twisted and lashed, but Leora's connection to him allowed them to anticipate Malric's attacks, avoiding danger and striking back with unparalleled force. Yet Malric was relentless. He summoned a wave of energy, a tempest of shadow and fire, aiming directly at Kale. The king braced, ready to face the strike alone, but Leora's hand shot out, touching him. A pulse of energy flowed between them, guiding Kale, shielding him, and giving him strength beyond what he thought possible. Together they pushed back the darkness, forcing it to retreat if only momentarily. Kale looked at her, awe and gratitude shining in his eyes. "I could not do this without you," he admitted. "You do not need to do it alone," Leora said softly. "Never forget that." The battlefield was quiet for a brief moment, the storm of shadows holding back as if considering their next move. Kale and Leora stood side by side, swords drawn, hearts aligned. For the first time they were not merely king and Omega, nor warrior and guide. They were a force united, a bond stronger than any magic or malice. Malric's fury broke the silence. He struck with all his power, a torrent of shadows and fire aimed to overwhelm them. Kale moved with Leora guiding him, countering every attack, matching every strike. And then, in a moment of clarity, Kale realized the truth Leora had shown him all along. Strength alone was not enough. The bond between them, the trust and understanding they shared, was their greatest weapon. They combined their efforts, moving as one. Kale's sword struck with precision, Leora's insight guiding him through every danger. Shadows twisted and lashed, but their connection acted like a shield, a light in the darkness. Malric's attacks faltered, his power unable to match the unity of two hearts fighting together. Finally, Kale and Leora stood before the sorcerer, exhausted, battered, yet unbroken. Kale's eyes met Leora's, and in that gaze they found strength, courage, and a shared resolve. He struck a final blow, not with anger but with clarity and purpose, forcing Malric to retreat, defeated, into the shadows from which he had come. The battlefield was silent, save for the wind whispering through the trees and the soft murmur of the rivers nearby. Kale lowered his sword, breathing heavily, his gaze never leaving Leora's. "You were incredible," he said, his voice low. I do not know how I could have faced him without you." Leora smiled faintly, her hand brushing against his arm. "You faced him because you never gave up," she said. "I only helped you see the path." Kale felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he had thought long dead, hope, trust, and something deeper, something tender. For the first time, he understood that power alone could not protect a kingdom. Love, courage, and unity could. The journey back to the palace was quiet. The kingdom had survived, the threat repelled, but Kale knew that both the land and its king had changed. He was no longer just a ruler of strength and fury. He was a man who had learned to trust, to care, and to share his burdens. At the palace, the nobles greeted them with awe and relief. Whispers of the battle and of Leora's role in guiding and protecting the Alpha King spread quickly. Yet Kale did not care for the praise or recognition. His eyes sought only Leora's, And in that gaze, he found a new kind of peace. In the quiet of the evening, Kale and Leora stood together atop the highest balcony. The first sunlight in weeks broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the kingdom. The storm had passed, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. "You have changed me," Kale admitted, his voice soft. "Not just in battle, but in ways I cannot explain." "You have always been more than what you let others see," Leora said, her blind eyes meeting his. "I only helped you remember it." Kale reached for her hand, holding it gently. For the first time, he did not feel the weight of the crown pressing him down. He felt balance, trust, and the quiet strength of someone who would stand with him, no matter the storms to come. "Then we face the future together," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it as one." Leora nodded. "Together." And in that moment, the kingdom of Thaloria seemed to breathe anew. The darkness that had haunted them receded, replaced by the promise of a brighter day. The Alpha King had faced his rage, his fears, and the sorcerer's wrath, and he had emerged not only victorious but transformed. Kale and Leora's bond, forged in shadows and tempered by trust, had become the light that would guide Thaloria into the days ahead. Together they would heal the kingdom, protect its people, and embrace the future with courage and hope. And though Malric remained a threat in the shadows, his power diminished by the unity of the Alpha King and the blind Omega, Kale knew that nothing, not even the darkest sorcery, could break the bond they had forged. The kingdom awoke to a new dawn, and on the palace balcony, Kale and Leora stood side by side. Hands clasped, hearts aligned, they gazed out over their land. The trials were over, but the legend had only begun. Together they had faced the shadows, survived the fire, and discovered a truth far greater than any battle. That trust, love, and unity were the most powerful forces of all. The Alpha King and the blind Omega had found each other, and in doing so, they had found the strength to face anything the world could throw at them. And in that light, the kingdom of Thaloria would never be the same.